Hey guys, Dustin Magic here, and it's time for part 5 of my awesome new series about mistakes that you're probably making in your everyday MTG playing. I know you think you couldn't possibly be any worse of a player, but here's another thing that you're probably doing wrong. It's okay, Space Jace forgives you. Now this one's another rules-related thing, so if you're really familiar with the rules, you probably already know this, but not a lot of people know the specific rules of MTG, which is kind of shocking based on how long I know some people have been playing. But maybe it's never come up, or you or your opponent just never knew that this was a thing. I'm of course talking about spell targeting and how it truly actually works. The first rule that I have to say, and this one I guarantee most people know, you can't cast the spell unless you have a valid target. The most recent example was at the pre-release, somebody tried to play Shamble back, and they said, oh, well, exile target creature card from a graveyard, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So they thought, oh, that's just all the things the spell does, I don't actually need to do the first part. And there is some basis in logic there. I mean, there are cards that say, your opponent discards a card and then you gain 5 life or something. And you basically just ignore the first part. Not really. I mean, it just seems like you ignore the first part if their hand is empty. So, some activated abilities like Planeswalker abilities, they still go off. But they actually, some of them don't though. You gotta watch out for that. All the new Planeswalkers say up to 1 creature gains this boost, because then it could be 0, because there were a couple Planeswalkers where if you did not have a single creature on the battlefield on either side, you actually couldn't use his plus ability. But other than that, there are the new ones that say up to 1, and people just think, oh, I can just cast this spell, use this ability, do this, do that, and just not have a completely valid target for 100% of the spell and the rest will go off. That is not the case. Except for a couple select cards. So you always want to check the card rulings, because if there's a ruling saying, hey, if there's an invalid target for the first part, who cares? It doesn't need, it's not necessary or whatever. But 99% of the time you're going to have a Shamble back situation where if you do not have a creature card from a graveyard, if you don't have any creature cards in any graveyard, yours or your opponent's, then you cannot cast the spell at all because you don't have a valid target. Now really the biggest exception is if you see the word may, but everybody knows to watch out for the word may absolutely everywhere in MTG because that means you don't have to do it. Now let's talk about how targeting actually works. Let's say I have a kill spell and I'm trying to blow up a green elf of some sort, but the elf has tap to give itself hexproof. I think that actually is a real elf, come to think of it. Well, I've had people say, oh, but my kill spell, I targeted it, and then in response you gave it hexproof, but I already successfully targeted it. Like, at the time my spell was being cast, I targeted it, so no problem. You can give it hexproof all day, it doesn't matter, the spell's already, locked in like a homing missile, it knows your location, and then it's going to blow you up anyway. That is not the case. Virtually every targeted spell ever, and the only exceptions are in the card's actual rulings, but virtually every other spell has to be targeted at the time it's cast, and has to recheck for a valid target at the time the spell actually resolves. So you cast your Murderous Cut to blow up Mr. Elf, and in response they say, okay, I'm gonna grant it hexproof, then that goes onto the stack, the ability. So first, it gets hexproof. Second, your spell attempts to kill it. But before your spell can even be considered, you have to say, hey, is it still a valid target? Now, hexproof is an easy example. There are a couple others I could give, but let's just make one up because I don't feel like looking up what cards these are. Let's say you have a card that says, destroy target creature with power 3 or less. And in response, they give it, Titanic Growth and boost it up to be like a 5/5. That would go on the stack first. So then they would become a 5/5, and then yours would attempt to see if it's a valid target, and it would say, hey, the spell doesn't even have a valid target anymore because you're targeting a creature with greater than 3 power. And then there's really one more thing about targeting that you should know. If the target fails, the spell fizzles. And there are just a very, very, very couple exceptions, and once again, it comes down to the card ruling. And there are a lot of older cards when, I don't know, Wizards just designed weirder cards, I guess, or more powerful cards. It's usually spells with 2 effects, like blow up a creature, gain 5 life. Some of them say if you fail to blow up a creature at targeting time, you still gain the 5 life. But usually it's like a mode thing or some kind of strive or something. Actually, I think Strive is probably the best example. If the primary target is no longer a valid target because it's like no longer on the field or it has hexproof, the other targets still get hit. The spell still goes off, which is really counterintuitive. You would think, okay, you know, as long as I can hit the first one, then I can chain it, and who cares what happens after that? But no, it's just a multi-targeted spell, and it doesn't really matter which one was the primary target and which one wasn't. Though surprisingly, the same goes for multi-kicker. Even I didn't think that was true until I just checked it. The ruling states precisely as long as any of its targets are legal at the time strength of the Tijuru, for example, resolves, you'll put a +1/+1 counter on each of those legal targets. And that really does have a primary target and then secondary targets after that. So if in response they blow up your primary target, that's fine. Now, before you go thinking that every spell works that way and you can just target stuff willy-nilly, don't forget about Bile Blight, which honestly is one of the most underrated cards ever printed because people just didn't appreciate it because it was in Born of the Gods. I don't know what the hell's wrong with people. Anyway, it only has one target, and so if the initial target fails, the after effect, I guess, of the spell does not go off. It kind of has to do specifically with the fact that the other creatures aren't targeted. So let's say they have 5 creatures with the same name, they're all tokens, and 4 of them have hexproof. If you Bile Blight the one that doesn't have hexproof, all the other ones die because it's just like a field effect or whatever they call it, an untargeted mass effect. So yes, as long as that first target is still legal, then all the rest die. But if they magically give the 5th one, the one that you're actually targeting, if they give that hexproof, the spell does absolutely nothing. Now, speaking of the spell doing nothing, this is huge, because this I've seen people screw up all the time. Let's say there's a spell that says, blow up target creature, then gain 100 life. So you try to blow up their creature, but in response, they give it hexproof, or exile it, or flicker it, or move it off the battlefield, or whatever. They make it an invalid target somehow. Your spell is properly targeted when you attempt to cast it, but then when it actually goes off, when it resolves or attempts to resolve, you recheck the target, see that it's invalid, and now your whole spell is invalid. The whole spell never happens. So any kind of after effect, any kind of second effect, you do not get that effect unless the card's ruling specifically says that you do, or if it's like Strive or Multi-Kicker, etc. So read the rulings if you really want to know how your specific card works. Now, the funny thing is, it really is in chronological order. If it says, gain 100 life, then blow up target creature, instead of gain 100 life and blow up target creature, you would most likely, in most cases, get the 100 life if it said then, because then it's like an after effect. And unless they prevented you from gaining the life, it doesn't really matter if you successfully blow up the creature or not, because that's just the second part. Now, this is kind of unrelated because we're talking about targeting, but people get this wrong too, so I'm throwing it in there. You know the card Sinister Concoction? It says you have to pay 1 black mana, comma, pay 1 life, comma, put the top card of your library into your graveyard, comma, discard a card, comma, sacrifice Sinister Concoction, colon. And I think we all know the universal rule of colons in MTG. Anything before the colon is a cost, anything after the colon is what the spell actually does, or ability, or pretty much anything else. Now, if it said pay 1 black mana, colon, you may pay 1 life, you may put the top card of your library in the graveyard, you may discard a card, or if it says you may do any of the following or something like that, okay, that's different. But no, these are all part of the actual cost. Everything before the colon has to happen. If you can't make something before the colon happened, then you didn't successfully pay for the spell. Now, a little fun fact while we're on the topic, in the process of paying for the spell, or any spell, or paying for anything, just doing any kind of payment, basically, none of the payment actions or effects that you take are respondable. So you can't pay 1 mana, pay 1 life, put the top card of your library in your graveyard, then your opponent responds to it, then you discard a card, then you sacrifice Sinister Concoction. Doesn't work that way. It's all part of the payment. Like, if you just, you're doing them in chronological order, which, by the way, with this card, you don't have to do. You can actually do those in any order. That is really important. Let's say the very first thing you do is put the top card of your library into your graveyard, and then they say, oh, he's about to get Delirium because he just flipped a land in. I better blow up Sinister Concoction. No, sorry, you get to finish paying the mana, paying the life, and sacrificing Sinister Concoction. So payments are not considered targeting, but they're just as important as targeting. You have to have a valid target, and you also have to have a valid like payment, I guess you will say. Now, one more thing that I should probably touch upon is really complicated spell targeting, because when you target spells on the stack, half the time you don't even know you're doing it. Let me explain. So let's say your opponent's casting Platinum Angel, and you're thinking, oh man, I gotta flip this table over, and then you realize, oh, I actually have a Nullify in hand. That counters target creature or aura spell. Well, that word target isn't for decoration. It's not just like, oh, you're casting a spell, here's a counter spell, that's how that works, and you just don't think twice about it, which is honestly what even I do most of the time. Their Platinum Angel leaves their hand and goes onto the stack, which I believe the spell stack is an actual zone, and things in zones can be targeted, typically. So when you cast Nullify, you're saying, okay, I'm paying 2, here's the spell, put it on the stack, my target is this spell on the battlefield on the stack in the zone. Now, as long as the target is valid at cast time and the target is, a valid spell that's on the board and still there, etc., your spell will go off, and then you counter their target spell. Simple, right? Well, here's a fun example that'll illustrate why it's totally not that simple, but honestly still is. Okay, so they have an Elvish Mystic on the field, just a 1/1. What are they going to do? Because you've got an Emrakul and an Ishkanah. Holy crap, they're screwed. Oh my god, what are they going to do? Well, it's their turn, we'll say, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to cast Prey Upon on their Elvish Mystic. And of course, that's a really epic card from Eldritch Moon. It says, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Simple, simple. Well, you have a 13/13 and a 3/5. What's he possibly going to fight? So you're like, yeah, fine, alright, that spell goes, I won't respond to it. And then in response to their own spell, they cast Titanic Growth, and then in response to that, after giving you a chance to respond, they cast another Titanic Growth. Now, first, why did you not respond to the first Titanic Growth? Because now it's bigger and you have, some counter spells and stuff, and you want to do something about it. Because you could let it resolve first, and the Prey Upon will still be on the stack for you to screw with. So just in case they want to add another boosting spell to the stack, let them get away with it and just say, no, I don't have a response to Titanic Growth. They'll say, okay, that's all I'm putting on the stack. Titanic Growth resolves. And then after it resolves, you have a chance to respond to jumping to the next spell down on the stack, which is Prey Upon. So you were a hyper-intelligent player now that you know that. So you let them cast Prey Upon, then you let them cast Titanic, and then Titanic. So once the last Titanic Growth goes off, you're like, oh, okay. On top of the stack, just so that they don't do anything crazy and additional, because, why wait? You cast a Redirect. Well, Redirect states, word for word, you may choose new targets for target spell. So you cast it targeting Prey Upon. Now, some people think that you can only respond to or target the last spell that was put on the stack. That is not true. The spell stack is a zone, and you can target anything in it, because now it's a spell that's sort of on the battlefield, or in play. It's not on the battlefield. So, Redirect, if you read, the rulings and stuff, if the card has multiple targets, you can change all of the targets. Well, they only have one Elvish Mystic, and the only valid target is Elvish Mystic. So, other than that, you'll change the target that they're fighting, which obviously they're trying to fight Ishkanah to kill it. You change their target of the second target to Emrakul. So now their 9/9 Elvish Mystic is targeting Emrakul to fight. Emrakul is a 13/13, boom, they're dead. Now maybe this isn't the greatest example because you could have just redirected one of the Titanic Growths at Ishkanah instead, and then Ishkanah would have been gigantic, Elvish Mystic would have only been a 5/5, and Ishkanah would have just mauled it. But I just wanted to outline the fact that you could target stuff way down on the stack as long as it's still on the stack, and you could let part of the stack resolve, and still the lower down spells are still available spells that can be targeted. So spells are targetable, not just permanents. Well, as long as the spell that you're casting or the ability says target spell, of course. Now, if you're like, oh man, that's kind of complicated, but I get it. Ha ha! That's not what happened. In response to you casting Redirect, they cast Negate. And what do they target with that Negate? Why, Prey Upon, of course. You might want to take this opportunity to hide under your desk, because this whole analogy is falling apart. Why the hell wouldn't they negate the Redirect? But shut up, they didn't. I mean, really, you're finding it hard to believe that your opponent in this scenario is an idiot? I mean, come on, how often is your opponent an idiot? So they negate their Prey Upon while you're already targeting it with Redirect. So here's what happens. Negate goes off first, kills off the Prey Upon. So the Prey Upon is removed from the stack, even though it's on the bottom of the stack, it's now gone because it's been countered. Then Redirect attempts to resolve, but at resolution time you recheck if you have a valid target. You're targeting a spell, Prey Upon, that's no longer there, you no longer have a valid target. Your Redirect spell fizzles, goes straight to the graveyard, it is not even cast in the first place. Well, it doesn't resolve, it is cast. The word cast and discard in Magic piss me off because they do not mean successfully cast or successfully discard. They mean attempting to do it, and that just bugs me. Anyway, so your Redirect fizzles, and they have a giant 9/9 Elvish Mystic that they will then proceed to swing with. Because obviously the Titanic Growths will still go off. So it goes negate, successful, there goes Prey Upon, Redirect, fizzles, Titanic Growth, still a valid target, goes off, other Titanic Growth goes off. There's the spell slot that used to contain Prey Upon, but now it's been countered, so it's gone. And then that's the end of the stack, and the result is a giant 9/9 Elvish Mystic. So spell targeting can be invalid at the time that you cast it as well. Now here's just one more fun trick, because why not? Your head doesn't hurt enough. Okay, I'm not even going to bother to draw this, but just make it in your head. You cast a boost spell, they cast a cancel. Oh no, they're trying to cancel your boost spell. So then you cast another boost spell on top of the stack, because at least one will go off, and they respond with another cancel. Oh my god, they're ruining your day. But have no fear, you have Redirect in your hand, so what are you going to do with Redirect? It's useless, they're not targeting anything, none of your permits are in trouble. No, you can change the spell target. So what you would do is take the topmost cancel, the one that's highest up on the stack, that was just cast, and redirect that cancel, change its target from your second boost spell to the other cancel. So then your Redirect goes off, the cancel has its target modified, cancel goes off, it counters the other cancel, then your boost spell goes off, then your other boost spell goes off. Oh, I'm sorry, did I hear that your head doesn't hurt enough yet? Okay, this is getting into the special rulings that are specific to Redirect, so I don't know how universal this is, but... So you're trying to cast a kill spell on their most important creature, you really need that creature gone to win the game, and they respond with the devil himself, Dissolve, which says counter target spell scry 1, it's cancel on steroids. And all you got left in hand is a Redirect. I mean, what are you going to do with a Redirect? Change the target of the kill spell to something else and then still have it be countered? What would be the point? Here's a fun one for you. You can legally redirect Dissolve at Redirect itself, apparently. So you pay for the spell, Redirect, you put Redirect on the stack, and you target Dissolve. Now at resolution time you say, hey, I'm changing Dissolve's target to Redirect, and Redirect is already on the stack, so it's targetable. So then, okay, Redirect goes off, it resolves, it goes to the graveyard. Then Dissolve doesn't have a valid target because Redirect has already been removed from the stack. So then Dissolve fizzles, and guess what? They don't get to scry 1 because the spell fizzled. That's an after effect, so kudos to you who got the extra credit question, which is, does scry still go off? I didn't even ask it, really. But yeah, no, scry doesn't go off because the whole spell failed because it's targeting Redirect, and Redirect is no longer a valid targetable spell. And then your kill spell goes off and you win the game, yay. So this sounds really complicated, but it isn't. I mean, it's just like everything in Magic. It sounds really complicated, but it's perfectly logical and makes sense. As long as you just go step by step and follow the rules the way they're written, no problem. The basic rules, like I said, are just make sure the target is valid at cast time, make sure the target is still valid when it comes to resolution time of the spell or ability. And of course, the third rule is if a spell no longer has a valid target, the entire spell fizzles. Of course, with the exception of certain particular multi-targeted spells like Multi-Kicker and Strive. Although I didn't mention this before, if you have like Strive 3 and all 3 of the targets are invalid, the entire spell fails. It fizzles and goes to the graveyard, and the rest of the spell does not resolve. So yeah, this video got a little bit longer than I thought, but I wanted to touch on every possible scenario and just really give you really good, mental pictures of how targeting works, how you can screw with targeting, how you can change targeting in time for when the spell goes off, then the spell will fail. And I've honestly just won entire games because of this. That's how unbelievably important it is to understand how this works. You're forcing them in some cases to lose 1 or 2 spells, all of their mana, basically the rest of their turn, and like possibly the rest of the cards in their hand. I mean, it's just that devastating. Okay, I have to throw in one more example. It's honestly more of just like a story because this actually happened. The Beholder deck used to have Redirect in it because it's one of my top 5 favorite cards of all time. I go first, drop a land. He goes second, drops in, I think something tapped. That's why this kind of backfired on him. I drop my second island and pass. He says, oh, cool, I'll untap my land, drop another land, whatever. Thoughtseize, haha, target player reveals his or her hand. You choose the non-land card from it. That player discards that card, you lose 2 life. And those are all sequential after effects. And I said, haha, tap 2 blue islands for 2 blue mana. Redirect. I'm changing the target player portion of your spell to you because you're a player. Oops, they probably should have had Thoughtseize say target opponent, but oh well, gotta put a weakness in it somewhere, I guess. So guess what he had to do? Well, target player, him, my opponent, reveals his or her hand, so he had to reveal his whole hand to me. Then it says you, which is still him, the controller of the spell, or the owner of the spell. Or no, actually it is controller of the spell. Anyway, he chose a non-land card out of his own hand. That player, which is him, discards that card. You, which is still him, lose 2 life. Ouch! So he lost his Thoughtseize out of hand by casting it, and basically unsuccessfully. And then he lost another non-land card from his hand and took 2 damage. And if I remember correctly, I think he shocked himself for 2 to tap for the damage. I think his first land didn't generate black. I think that's what it was. Then his second one was a fetch, so then he fetched one that paid, you paid 2 life to make it come in untapped, tapped for black. So he ended up short 2 cards and 4 life. Oh, actually 5 because he had to fetch it. I ended up winning that game. So targeting is fun, targeting is your friend. If you have any more funny targeting stories, or if you have any really good examples that I missed, because targeting is really complicated and really ubiquitous in the game. So I'm sure I missed some kind of scenario that somebody's going to mention down in the comment section. And of course, if you have any questions about particular scenarios, those are really big in the other videos. People are asking, oh, what if this, and it's great scenarios. So make sure, even if you don't have a question, you go check out the comment section, and I will do my best to answer every scenario to the best of my ability. So don't forget to retarget your mouse cursor at the like button if you thought this video was helpful, or if you just really like that stupid joke. And if you hit the subscribe button, I promise I will not cast Redirect and subscribe you to PewDiePie. But I will see you guys next video.